Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Qalu subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Now this shock is this is the second lecture on the shock. We have already done water and electrolyte balance, acid-base balance in 4 lectures, and this is the second lecture on the shock. So shock is a French word. As I told last time also, the term shock was originally produced. It means there is a fight between the two warriors, a fight between the two groups. So, and then different people mention in a different way. So what are the determinant of shock? There is inadequate tissue perfusion. So it means if there is inadequate tissue perfusion, there will be inadequate oxygen supply. But there could be other way around. Perfusion is normal and normal oxygen supply, but the demand of oxygen by the tissue is more. So there is a relative deficiency of oxygen in the tissues. Now, breakdown of cellular metabolism, the microcirculatory homeostasis, that fails. When the microcirculatory system fails, then the chain of events starts from there. Hyperperfusion of the peripheral tissue, that leads to transcapillary exchange of different components of the hemodynamics. So that causes the problem. Now, there will be disproportion between VO2 and DO2. So this terminology, VO2 means the amount of oxygen which has been taken from the blood by the tissue. DO2 is the amount of oxygen which is delivered to the tissue. Now this DO2 depends on the hemoglobin level and the percent saturation of hemoglobin. Plus there is oxygen which is dissolved in the blood also under the partial pressure of oxygen. That's very little amount. So the bulk of oxygen is carried by hemoglobin. So that is the DO2, that delivery of oxygen. Then if you take the venous sample, you look at the difference of DO2 of arterial blood and the venous blood, that is the amount which has been taken by tissue, and it is called VO2. It's the volume of oxygen which has been taken by tissue. But still, at this stage, even if the DO2 is normal, even if the VO2 is normal, but we don't know whether the tissues are using it or not. If the tissues are not using, it means metabolism is going on without the use of oxygen. So there will be lactate production, like in cyanide poisoning. You can see there is a proper extraction of oxygen, but tissues cannot use it. Now, hemodynamic states of the shock. It could be hyperdynamic state, it could be hypodynamic state, and it could be related to cardiac output, it could be related to systemic vascular resistance. Because as last time we discussed, this blood pressure is nothing but cardiac output into peripheral resistance. And cardiac output is nothing, it is the stroke volume into heart rate. Stroke volume is nothing, it depends on the preload. I mean, blood which has been delivered to the heart and how efficient is the contractility of the heart. So it will depend on 2 things, that is the preload and the contractility of the heart. And the preload depends again, gravitational effect, total blood volume, then intrapleural pressure, and so on, 7 or 8 factors which affect it. Then we said cardiac output into peripheral resistance. Peripheral resistance depends on 2 factors. One is caliber of the blood vessel, whether they are vasoconstricted or vasodilated, and viscosity of the blood. Viscosity of blood is mainly dependent on the hemoglobin concentration. So all these things, you can see preload, contractility of myocardium, then the heart rate and stroke volume, and the peripheral resistance. So if any person with a blood pressure disturbance comes to do, you can analyze what is the causative factor. And that causative factor, you have to replace it or you have to correct it. So that's what happens in hemodynamics. So it could be hyperdynamic state, it could be hypodynamic state. And could be problem with the cardiac output, or it could be a problem with the systemic vascular resistance. So as a doctor, you should be able to analyze these things. Then mediators of shock. Could be toxins like endotoxin, could be exotoxins also. Then polypeptides which are complement factors, opioids and TNF and interleukins. There are so many things which add to this shock. Then fatty acid derivatives like arachidonic acid, eicosanoid metabolism. Eicosanoid metabolism takes you to the arachidonic acid. Then arachidonic acid has got two pathways, the cyclooxygenase and other things, all the prostaglandins and other things. So all these things, they are the mediators of shock. So I'm just quickly going through it because we did it last time also. So people divide the shock in a different way. The last time I gave you different classification, that you can have hypovolemic shock, distributic shock, you can cardiogenic shock, you can be obstructive shock. Then in a hypovolemic shock, obviously there is a blood volume is less. It could be whole blood loss, could be water loss, could be electrolyte loss, and could be water and electrolytes loss also, combined with the so many other things also. Could be dehydrative also, could be burns also. So you can put in any way, but it means the problem is at the cell level. We have to deliver the oxygen as required by the tissue to have the proper metabolism, to have the proper product of metabolism. In distributed shock, they say it is because of sepsis. Sepsis causes vasodilatation. The same, even if you have got the normal blood volume, when there is a vasodilatation, so there will be discrepancy between the capacity and the content. That will cause relative hypovolemia. Then same is with anaphylactic or anaphylactoid. It produces histamine. As I mentioned last time also, histamine stimulates all the smooth muscles of the body except those of cardiovascular system. So, which means the histamine, when will stimulate the other smooth muscles, it will stimulate the smooth muscles of bronchial tree, will cause bronchospasm. And but in the cardiovascular system, it causes vasodilatation, and it also causes tachycardia. So it will have tachycardia due to vasodilatation, that is relative hypovolemia, that will cause hypovolemic shock. So this we can't make it as a separate entity. Then neurogenic shock also, so it will be vasodilatation also. Again, it will cause relative hypovolemia, and that will lower the preload. That will lower the preload. That will decrease the cardiac output. When decrease the cardiac output, it will drop the blood pressure. Obstructive shock like pulmonary embolism, cardiac tamponade, and pneumothorax, only 3 causes. So all these can be corrected. If you know it is a tamponade or if you know it's a pneumothorax, put the tubes there and drain it out. So there's no problem. Now, if you look at this, as to differentiate between hemorrhagic shock, anaphylactic shock, and cardiogenic shock, and septic shock, and then septic hypodynamic or hyperdynamic shock. So you look at the 4 parameters. Look at the preload, look at the cardiac output, look at the pulmonary vascular resistance and systemic vascular resistance. There will be difference in all these, and if you sit down and you can actually pinpoint what is the cause. Is it easier? It's not difficult, right? You don't need to discuss in detail. Now, inotropic agents and vasodilators. Now, there are inotropic agents which increase the contractility of myocardium. They have nothing to do with the vessels. Then vasodilators dilate, vasopressors which constrict the vessel. These are the 3 types of drugs which we use as required by the type of the shock. So in this big list, epinephrine, norepinephrine, we use epinephrine in the form of adrenaline. Norepinephrine, norphine, which we are using. Then dopamine, dobutamine, dopexamine, vasopressin, and amrinone. Amrinone is phosphodiesterase inhibitors. So amrinone is available in PIC but not available in market. So all these have got a little bit of different actions. Like epinephrine is alpha stimulant, predominantly alpha, and predominantly is a beta stimulant, but it has got alpha stimulant effect also. We can say both effect, beta 1 and beta 2. Then you should know where are the alpha receptors, where are the beta 1 receptors, where are the beta 2 receptors. Then norepinephrine is predominantly alpha stimulant. it causes vasoconstriction, but little bit of a beta stimulative effect also. In Western countries, when we use norepinephrine, we are commonly using it, so it raises the blood pressure and lowers the heart rate through the baroreceptor. When you very quickly cause the vasoconstriction, then the blood pressure will shoot. When the blood pressure shoots through the baroreceptor, it should cause bradycardia. But here, I don't know what are the preservatives they are putting in. When we increase the norepinephrine, it causes tachycardia with raising of blood pressure. It's very strange. There is some problem in synthesis. Dobutamine is purely beta stimulant. It's a beta 1 and beta 2 receptor. So you should always know beta 1 receptor is on the heart, and beta 2 receptors are in the skeletal blood vessels. Just imagine, but there are so many other sites also. So when you give beta stimulant drug, you not only increase the heart rate, but you also open up the skeletal blood vessel. Don't expect from the inotropic agent, particularly dobutamine, to raise the blood pressure if there is a peripheral vascular problem. It will drop the blood pressure. Dobutamine is only indicated when there is a depressed myocardial contractility or if there is a problem with the heart. So, but it will, at the same time, it will cause skeletal vessel vasodilatation also. So we do not use dobutamine for patients who has got hypovolemic shock or who are vasodilated. So the best treatment for them is to use a vasopressor. So if there is a heart problem, then dobutamine is the first choice. Right? So always keep in mind that dobutamine can drop the blood pressure in hypovolemia. Tremendously it drops sometimes. Dopexamine is also then you got dopamine. And dopamine is dopamine receptor 1, dopamine receptor 2 stimulant. It's used by the cardiologist. It's not an intensified drug, but we use also because we don't have a choice, which is called dopexamine. Because dopexamine, in addition to dopaminergic receptor stimulation, it also causes beta 1 and beta 2 stimulation. So it saves the renal tubular cell. But dopamine damages the renal tubular cell. That is a drawback of dopamine. Then vasopressin is very strong, potent. It is 4 times more stronger than the norepinephrine. So it's a beautiful drug. It is used in units. Also, it's not available over here. Then amrinone is phosphodiesterase inhibitor. These are beautiful drugs. Amrinone is such a drug, or even say we use for asthma, this as aminophylline. So they not only has got an inotropic effect, they also has got a lucitropic effect. Lucitropic effect is that they increase the diastolic phase also, because the coronary circulation is maximally done during diastolic phase. And at the same time, if you increase the diastolic phase, so it means you'll give longer time for the blood to be accumulated during diastole in the heart, so there will be more blood will be put out on the subsequent systole. So it's a beautiful drug. At the same time, it also lowers the pulmonary vascular resistance also. So it's a beautiful drug. But it's not routinely used. Here, this is a choice, you have to choose one of those. But cardiologists, they are using it. I love to use it. I never, in Nishtar, when I had to use it, there was no amrinone available. I used to use aminophylline infusion. Can use it. So then nifedipine, nitroglycerin, nitroprusside, and prostacyclin. So you got a choice of drug, then the receptors on which this act. So you can choose one of those according to progress of. Next topic which I want to discuss is the sepsis. So if physicians or anybody in the ICU cannot find any cause, they say patient is septic. This is not right. It means we are just telling our weakness that we cannot diagnose the patient. So every year about 750,000 people die because of sepsis, and in the whole world, 18 million people die. In only US, it is 750,000. Mortality is 1,400 per day. Growth rate is 1.5% every year in spite of so many antibiotics. Then mortality rate is 30 to 50%. If the patient goes into sepsis and goes into septic shock, then the mortality increases. Even up to 70% also the patient dies. So then, according to American, the cost per case is about $22,000. Now, what is sepsis? Now, it is a complex interaction between the microorganisms, toxins, and immune system. When there is bacteria enters the blood, microorganisms enter the blood, we call it as bacteremia. Then they start releasing the toxins. Could be endotoxins, could be exotoxins. Endotoxins are like you are sitting in a corner and firing. And exotoxin is like khudkush, hamla. They destroy themselves also and destroy the people around also. Those are the exotoxins. So when the toxins are released, they go into toxemia. Now when they stimulate the immune system, they go into systemic inflammatory response syndrome. So it goes stage-wise. If you catch the patient when only the organism has gone in, it's very easy to control it. When the toxins are there, then it's very easy. Once the immune system is stimulated, so there are a lot of type of substances which are released. Like when there is a bacterium plus toxins plus immune system is stimulated. So there will be cytokine production, there will be prostaglandins activation, and there is activation of coagulation. Three things happen: cytokines, prostaglandin, and activation of coagulation. Then we say the patient has gone into systemic inflammatory response syndrome. So it will affect every organ of the body. It's not a single organ, it's every organ of the body. What does it do? It causes generalized endothelial injury. It means it will increase the permeability of capillary, and that will cause edema and ischemia, because when there is edema, it will not let the oxygen and the nutrition to reach to the cell. So it will cause ischemia. Then coagulation is stimulated. The patient goes into coagulopathy, depending on the stage. That is a consumptive coagulopathy, or you are only in a fibrolytic syndrome. So it affects the multiple organs, so the patient goes into multiple organ failure. So it goes in the same way. First of all, bacteremia, then toxemia. Then patient goes into systemic inflammatory response syndrome. As it is affecting the multiple organs, so it will goes into multiple organ failure. Now, if you look at this eicosanoid metabolism is membrane phospholipids. In membrane phospholipids, this PLA2, phospholipase 2, it produces arachidonic acid, and this phospholipase A2 is stimulated by angiotensin 2, bradykinin, thrombin, and epinephrine. They are the stimulant. They produce arachidonic acid, then takes up the two pathways. One is lipooxygenase pathway, other is cyclooxygenase pathway. And if lipooxygenase pathway take to produce leukotrienes and also lipoxins. And the cyclooxygenase pathway produces prostaglandins and produces thromboxins. And there are different types of prostaglandins, 8 or 9 types of prostaglandins. Right? So if you read in your physiology, and if you combine these 5 systems together, coagulation system, fibrinolytic system, kinin system, renin-angiotensin system, and eicosanoid metabolism, it will make the subject very clear and enjoyable. I can give you an example. In my first book I have combined the coagulation, fibrinolytic, and kinin system and renin system. Now I have just added this eicosanoid metabolism also, because when the kinins are stimulated, they stimulate the phospholipase 2. उसके फिर आगे इफेक्ट देखें आप. Now, when the coagulation starts, there is thrombin production, and thrombin stimulates the plasminogen to the plasminin, converts the plasminogen into plasmin. When the plasmin produces too much, so it will break up the thrombi, break up the the fibrinogen to fibrin, it will break up the fibrin. But at the same time, it sends a message to kinase system. Why don't you come up? Help us, because if you won't help us, vessel will not dilate. If vessel will not dilate, then it will block the vessel, it will affect the microcirculation. There are 3 types of kinases that are released: bradykinin, lysyl bradykinin, methionine lysyl bradykinin. They all act like histamine. They stimulate all the smooth muscles of the body except the outer cardiovascular system, open of the vessels. But when the vessel system sends a message to renal system also that we might open too much, patient blood pressure might drop too much, why don't you come into action? There is a more renin production, it will act on angiotensinogen and it start the whole process and produce angiotensin 2. Now when the angiotensin 2 is produced too much, it stimulates the equisynaptic metabolism that we might damage the patient. Why don't you come into action and produce some prostaglandins and thromboxane? So it goes like this. It's a beautiful physiological basic. If you read all 5 systems and combine together, you will enjoy it. Because how the nature can compensate one system stimulation by the stimulation of the other system. So that's why we say, we don't know so many things which are a blessing on our body, and if you look at this physiology, आदमी हैरान रह जाता है कि खुदा की ज़ात ने कैसे चीज़ों को मैनिपुलेट किया, वो कैसे कंपनसेट करते हैं. There are markers of infection. Bacterial products as markers, bacterial products, endotoxins level, exotoxin level, enzymes and lipids. Then bacterial DNA, RNA, which we PCR, and all these things are being done. Pro-inflammatory factors, acute phase protein. What is a CRP? हम CRP करवाते हैं ना. CRP is C-reactive protein. Where it is synthesized? In the liver. It means if the patient has got infection and the liver is also damaged, CRP will not help you because it has to be synthesized by the liver. All the proteins are synthesized in the liver except gamma globulin. Even other globulins are also synthesized in the liver. So then with the hepatic failure, patient going into sepsis, those CRP will not help you. Then proximal markers of innate immune response like interleukin 6, interleukin 8, then complement 3A and phospholipase A2. Then macrophage products like procalcitonin, then leucotrin. Then neutrophil products like elastase and lactoferrin. Then coagulation markers like tissue plasminogen activator. There are so many markers of diagnosing the sepsis. Now, in therapy of sepsis, specific, you give antibiotic, antimicrobes, and depending on bundles, then you give drotococin, that is alpha activated drotococin, which is not available over here in England. It is included in the 24-hour management of sepsis bundles. Then in sportive treatment, you support the hemodynamics. When you support the hemodynamics, you will have to use the fluids, you have to use the vasopressor, you might have to use the inotropes, depending on all those factors which affect the blood pressure and perfusion. Then ventilatory support if it is required, right? So everything needs to be explained specifically. Then there is some additional therapy also, additional advanced support, that is adrenal hormone support, that is steroids. Tight glycemic control, glucose control will be very tight in sepsis. Number 2 is in the brain insult. The glucose should be stringent control. It should be stringent control. It should be kept between 120 and 140. Because if there is edema, there is less oxygen supply. If there is less oxygen supply, but you have got the supply of nutrition, glucose there, it will produce anaerobic, it will cause anaerobic metabolism, and it will produce lactate, and lactate will cause vasodilatation or vasopressin in the brain. It will increase intracranial pressure. So you will have to be very careful giving glucose or controlling the glucose. Now, hormones, if you look at the steroids, if you look at from where the steroids are produced, from the adrenal gland. Where is the adrenal gland? On the top of kidney. And what is the histological structure of adrenal gland? You have got cortex, then inside the cortex you have got medulla. It's like this. And cortex you've got three layers, glomerulosa, fasciculata, and reticularis. They all produce different type of steroids. Then after producing steroid, it passes through the medulla and drained by the vein. Nature would have put the medulla on the top and the cortex underneath, but no, it's not like this, because it has benefit, because the steroids are required by the production of catecholamines, synthesis and release of catecholamines from the medulla. That's why they pass through it. This is the effect of steroids. When the steroid goes into systemic circulation, they open up the postcapillary sphincter. They also sensitize the catecholamine receptors also, and they are antioxidant also, and they lower the intracranial tension also. So the steroid, which is normally produced, is very important, so that in sepsis, although there is a more steroid production, but the requirement of the tissue is much more increased as compared to production. So we should give steroids in sepsis, depending on the stage of sepsis. Those steroids are very important, and depending on the dose. So it has been internationally accepted that you should give cortisone, hydrocortisone, about 100 milligram 8 hourly, meaning 300 milligram 24 hours. You should not use, as used to be the old concept, methylprednisone given in grams. It is discouraged because there is no difference in giving grams and milligrams. Tight glycemic control I just mentioned. Then renal replacement, if the kidney goes into failure. So why not to do the renal replacement? Renal replacement therapy, what is that? Dialysis. You can give hemofiltration, hemodiafiltration, you can use cuff. There are so many choices for you. Then blood purification, like as we do. What are the blood purification? Plasmapheresis. So I'm a strong believer of that if the patient has got, if you look at the pathophysiology of this coronavirus, it attacks RBC. It attacks the site where the oxygen sits. It releases the heme, it breaks the heme into ferritin and other things. So why not to replace the RBCs? Nobody has done the study up to now, but I'm strongly believe that they should do it. As soon as you diagnose the person is positive, exchange the transfusion, do the exchange transfusion. Remove the blood and put another blood. Let him work his own way, we should work out in our own way. Why not replace it? As it has already released the cytokines, there is cytokine storm, why not to do plasmapheresis also at the same time? I'm sure you will get better result. But nobody is doing, because they cannot do on every patient. And very rarely we use this ECMO also in the world, ECMO. But it is very cumbersome to do it, but you get the benefit out of it, but its own drawbacks also, ECMO, as we have seen over here also. Now, glycemic control, hypoglycemia is when it is less than 80 milligram. Stringent control is when we keep it between 80 and 110. And then normal we label it as 111 to 144. It's a little bit high. 120 up to 125 is normal. Intermediate control is 145 to 180. Liberal control is less than 200. Then hyperglycemia, if the glucose go above 201 or 200, above 200 means 201 and above. So we'll have to have very stringent control when the patient has got sepsis or the patient has got intracranial insult. like head injury, like cerebral infarction, cerebral bleeding. So on those patients, we should be very careful controlling the glucose, because if you can't control it, you will raise the intracranial pressure. Now, in 2002, the European Society of Intensive Care, they all met and they said we should do something about this sepsis, because everybody has got its own treatment. So what they do is, they said in the first phase we should have 6-point action plan. On the second phase, we have got 17 action plans also. So before that, they said we should define the sepsis, and there are some parameters which we look at before we say the person is going into sepsis, like temperature. If it is less than greater than 38.3, how much is it? Centigrade. How do you convert the centigrade into Fahrenheit? Any idea? Multiply by 9/5 and add 32. See? When ऊपर से नीचे लाते हैं, when you convert the Fahrenheit to, you take 32, then multiply the 5/10, 5/9, उल्ट कर देते हैं उसको. Well, that will convert the centigrade into Fahrenheit and Fahrenheit into centigrade. Hypothermia also, in septicemia, patient can have a hypothermia also, less than 36. Heart rate greater than 90 per minute. Tachypnea. What is tachypnea? An increase in respiratory rate. What is hyperapnea? Increase in depth of breathing. What is orthopnea? This we will do when we go on to the respiratory failure. There are so many other terminology. Then altered mental state. In sepsis, if there is an altered mental state, this confirms that patient is going. But it doesn't mean if the person has got altered mental state, he is in sepsis. Because you will see so many people with altered mental state around. Significant edema. Then hyperglycemia greater than 120 milligram per deciliter when the person is not diabetic. So these are the general variations we look at the patient, we note in the patient. Then inflammatory variables. Leukocytosis, WBC greater than 12,000. Normal is 4 to 11,000. And leukopenia, if it is less than 4,000. So as it is 4 to 11 or 4 to 12,000. Now WBC with greater than 10% immature form. That's also indicator of septicemia. Then C-reactive protein, CRP, greater than 2 standard deviation. Plasma procalcitonin, greater than 2 standard deviation. The lab will tell you about this. Otherwise, you can look at the absolute value also. Severe sepsis, if the organ dysfunction is there, plus hypoperfusion or the hypotension, then we say the patient has gone into severe sepsis. Organ dysfunction variable, arterial hypoxemia, PaO2 divided by FiO2 less than 300. What is the normal ratio? PaO2, partial pressure of oxygen in the arterial blood divided by fractional inspired concentration of oxygen, FiO2. What is the normal? We'll do this when there is respiratory failure. You read it before you. It's a very simple thing to calculate, 1:5 ratio, right? So, okay, that's acute oliguria. Then creatinine greater than 2 milligram per deciliter. Coagulation abnormality, INR greater than 1.5 or activated partial thromboplastin time is greater than 60 seconds. Platelet count less than 100,000. Bilirubin greater than 35 millimole or greater than 2 milligram per deciliter. These are all parameters to diagnose severe sepsis. Right. Now, tissue perfusion variables. Now, hemodynamic variables, we look at the systolic blood pressure less than 90 and mean artery pressure less than 60. Okay? So, these parameters, tachycardia is never ignored. there is always a reason behind this, as I told you last time. Same way, the tachypnea should never be ignored. Hypotension should never be ignored. They're very important. Try to find the cause. Now, as a recommendation by that committee, they said we should do 11 international organizations laid the criteria. There should be 17 steps we should take. One is you initial resuscitation. Any patient who comes, you do the resuscitation. What is resuscitation? A, B, C, D, E, F. You go on like this. I always gave booklet in the ICU to the nurses also. Read that booklet, small booklet. It's only 5 and 10 pages only. You got one? No. Good. Nurses has got. Staff on you had got. Usko padh bhi le. And then diagnosis, right? Then antibiotic therapy. Source, you should control the source. Fluid therapy, if it is indicated, it will definitely be indicated. Then vasopressors, inotropic therapy, steroids, blood product administration, mechanical ventilation if it is required, then sedation or analgesia, then glucose control, renal replacement therapy, DVT prophylaxis, bicarbonate therapy, stress ulcer prophylaxis. Now, these 17 things you should keep in your mind when you're dealing with any patient in the ICU or any patient who has just started sepsis. So don't ignore it, you go in the same way, right? Then there is severe sepsis, bundles are there. This is called 6 hours bundles and 24 hours bundles. 6 hour bundles, we have to do few things within 6 hours, and then there are some things which you do in the subsequent 18 hours. Now 7 tasks are done within 6 hours. Immediately you measure the serum lactate. Even you will send the ABGs. Obtain the blood culture. Any patient who comes with a little bit of having fever, leukocyte like this, you send immediately blood sample for culture and sensitivity. And then you start the indicated antibiotic like respiratory system, what should be the first choice, other system, what are the first choice, second choice and third choice. You should have a list. As we got a list in IC, so you look at the list. Then obtain the culture, administer antibiotic within 3 hours. Or if they are not in emergency, they are in the hospital, it should be started within 1 hour. Then hypotension and or lactate greater than the 4 millimole per liter. So you should give the fluids 20 mils per kilogram body weight stat to this patient if you think that this is a sepsis. Then vasopressor, if the mean arterial pressure is to keep the mean arterial pressure greater than 65. Then persistent hypotension or lactate greater than 4, achieve the CVP, pass the CVP, achieve the CVP greater than 8, and achieve the SCVO2, what is that? Saturation of capillary or the venous blood, right? It should be greater than 70%, right? So these are done, 5, 6, 7 tasks they are done in first 6 hours. Immediately you start these. Then 24 hours, there are 4 goals within 24 hours. In addition to those, which you are already doing it, administer low dose steroid policy, 100 milligram, 8 hourly. Administer dortigon alpha, this is activated. ये प्रोटीन सी को स्टिमुलेट करते हैं. Where is the protein C? If you look at the internal coagulation pathway, so there is a role of protein C, S and protein Z. If you stimulate the protein C, it will interfere with the coagulation pathway of internal pathway. That's very important. The people who have got protein C deficiency from the birth, so they tend to coagulate. तो देखा होगा आप ये उसको भी 3 किस्म की 3 टाइप की होती है प्रोटीन सी डेफिशिएंसी, प्राइमरी, सेकेंडरी एंड कंपनसेटरी or something like that. Then maintains the glucose. Greater than lower limit, less than 8.3 millimole. If it is in millimole, you multiply with 18. So it should be less than 160, 170. Maintain the inspirative plateau pressure. If the patient goes onto the ventilator, you ventilate the patient, but keep the inspirative plateau pressure less than 30. If you go greater than that, you will cause the pneumothorax of the patient. So these are the guidelines.